3 months ago, Marcus Thompson wouldn't even look me in the eye when he passed my cubicle. The man who built Thompson Associates from the ground up treated me like furniture, something that took up space but served no real purpose. When clients came for meetings, I was the invisible coordinator who prepared presentations but never got to deliver them. When campaigns succeeded, my name vanished from the credits faster than morning fog in Denver's mountain air. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow saved something extra special for you. Last Tuesday, that same Marcus Thompson called me 17 times in one day. Each voicemail more desperate than the last. Each text message begging for just 5 minutes of my time. The man who once told me I should be grateful for the opportunity to fetch coffee now leaves messages saying he's grateful I might consider answering his calls. The woman who used to steal my ideas and present them as her own, Jessica Chun, now sends LinkedIn messages asking if we can collaborate on projects. The colleagues who excluded me from important meetings suddenly want to schedule lunch dates. To catch up and hear about my success, the company that made me feel worthless for 3 years now wants to hire me as their chief consultant. They thought I would always be small. They were wrong. My story begins in a cramped cubicle on the 3rd floor of Thompson Associates, where dreams went to die slowly under fluorescent lighting. The Denver marketing agency occupied a modest building in the business district. Nothing fancy, but Marcus Thompson acted like he owned half of Manhattan. I was Alex Rivera, fresh out of University of Colorado, with a marketing degree and enough student debt to finance a small country. The morning I started at Thompson Associates, I walked through those glass doors believing I was stepping into my career. Marcus shook my hand with the enthusiasm of someone picking up dry cleaning, mumbled something about starting at the bottom, and pointed me toward a desk that looked like it had survived the Clinton administration. My official title was marketing coordinator. What that really meant was professional coffee fetcher, presentation assembler, and corporate punching bag. Jessica Chen was already established as the golden child of the agency, with her perfectly styled hair and designer blazers that cost more than my monthly rent. She commanded respect from everyone in the office. She had this way of walking into rooms like she owned them, speaking with the kind of confidence that made clients lean forward and listen. What I didn't realize at first was that half of her brilliant campaigns started as rough sketches and ideas I'd submitted during our team brainstorming sessions. The pattern emerged slowly, like a developing photograph revealing its true image. I would submit detailed campaign concepts during Monday morning meetings, complete with target demographics, messaging strategies, and creative direction. Jessica would nod politely, sometimes ask a clarifying question or two. Then by Wednesday, she would present those same ideas to Marcus as her own innovations. The messaging would be slightly tweaked, the presentation would be polished to perfection, but the core strategy remained mine. Marcus ate it up every time. He would praise Jessica's creative thinking and strategic insights while I sat in the back of the conference room, watching my intellectual property get credited to someone else. When I tried to speak up once, suggesting that some elements of the campaign had been discussed in our earlier brainstorming session, Marcus barely glanced in my direction. "Alex, I appreciate your enthusiasm," he said with the tone reserved for children interrupting adult conversations. "But let's focus on execution rather than getting caught up in who said what first." Jessica has presented a comprehensive strategy. Here, that was the moment I learned that being right meant nothing if you weren't respected. Having good ideas meant nothing if you couldn't command attention. Working hard meant nothing if the right people didn't notice. The daily humiliations started small and grew like compound interest. Marcus would introduce me to clients as our coordinator with the same inflection most people used for our intern. During important presentations, I was responsible for operating the projector and ensuring everyone had water. But when clients asked questions about the campaigns I had helped develop, Marcus would redirect them to Jessica or handle the responses himself. The worst part wasn't the invisibility, it was the constant reminder of my supposed place in the hierarchy. When the agency landed a major client, Thompson Automotive, everyone celebrated except me. I had spent weeks researching their market position, analyzing their competitors, and developing the initial strategy framework that ultimately won the account. But when Marcus announced the team lead for the project, Jessica's name echoed through the conference room while I sat there, realizing I wouldn't even be invited to the client meetings. Alex will provide support documentation as needed, Marcus added, almost as an afterthought. Support documentation. 3 weeks of strategic research reduced to support documentation. My colleague Ryan Walsh, who started around the same time as me, seemed to navigate the office politics with ease. He had this ability to laugh at Marcus's jokes, even the ones that weren't funny, and somehow positioned himself as indispensable without actually producing anything remarkable. I mastered the art of being visible without being threatening, useful without being irreplaceable. You just need to play the game better, Ryan told me one afternoon as we waited for the elevator. Marcus responds to confidence. You present your ideas like you're apologizing for having them. Maybe he was right, but every time I tried to project more confidence, it felt like wearing clothes that didn't fit. When I attempted to speak up in meetings, my voice seemed to disappear into the corporate ether. When I tried to schedule 101 meetings with Marcus to discuss my career development, his assistant would inevitably reschedule them 3 times before they quietly disappeared from his calendar altogether. The breaking point came during the annual performance review cycle. I had prepared extensively, documenting every project I had contributed to, every campaign that had benefited from my research, every client interaction where I had provided valuable insights. I walked into Marcus's office with a folder full of evidence that I deserved more responsibility, better assignments, and recognition for my contributions. Marcus spent exactly 12 minutes reviewing my performance. 12 minutes to summarize an entire year of work, dedication, and professional growth. He praised my reliability and attention to detail while simultaneously explaining why those qualities made me perfect for my current role. When I mentioned my contributions to the Thompson automotive campaign, he acknowledged them with the same enthusiasm someone might reserve for discussing office supply inventory. Alex, you do solid work in your current capacity, he said, not bothering to look up from his computer screen. We need people who can handle the foundational tasks that keep everything running smoothly. Not everyone can be a lead strategist. And honestly, I think you're exactly where you need to be, where I needed to be, as if my professional aspirations were a GPS malfunction that needed correction. The salary increase that year was 2%. Jessica Chen, meanwhile, got promoted to senior account manager with a corner office and a salary that probably doubled mine, the woman who built her. Success on my uncredited ideas now had a title that reflected the value everyone thought she provided. That evening, I sat in my small apartment in Lakewood, staring at the rejection disguised as a performance review, and realized that staying at Thompson Associates meant accepting a permanent ceiling on my potential. They had decided who I was, and no amount of hard work or brilliant ideas would change their perception. But sometimes, the most important moments in our lives come disguised as endings. What felt like professional suffocation was actually the beginning of my transformation into someone they could never ignore again. The resignation letter sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I found the courage to print it. Every morning, I would stare at those 2 paragraphs of professional courtesy wrapped around a core of suppressed rage, wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my career. My sister Maria called it quits after I described my situation for the 100th time. Alex, you're not quitting a job, she said over coffee at Mountain Brew, our usual weekend spot. You're escaping a prison where they convinced you that being a prisoner was a privilege. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maria had always been the bold one in our family. While I second-guessed everything, she took decisive action. When her former employer denied her a well-earned promotion, she didn't bother with polite conversations or improvement plans. She quit on the spot and launched her own consulting business within a month. 2 years later, she was making 3 times her old salary. The difference between us, she said, stirring honey into her latte, is that you still think you need their permission to succeed. You believe Marcus Thompson controls your future. He doesn't, you do. Still, the idea of giving up a stable income felt like stepping off a cliff without knowing what lay below. My modest Lakewood apartment was affordable thanks to my job at Thompson Associates, and my student loans didn't care about my career dreams or professional pride. The rational part of me was warning against financial recklessness and career ruin. Then came an unexpected push from Sam Carter, a freelance marketing consultant who occasionally worked with our firm. After a client meeting, yet another where, Jessica had passed off my work as her own Sam approached me. "Alex, how long are you going to let them take credit for your work?" he asked as we waited for the elevator. His words hit hard. I had convinced myself that maybe I was being too sensitive, that Jessica's tweaks made her presentations unique enough. But Sam had been observing for months. According to him, I developed the strategies. Jessica claimed them. Marcus praised. Her and I faded into the background. Sam had once been in a similar position, but he'd left corporate life, built a thriving solo practice, and charged top rates because he delivered results and owned his success.
Ow.
You have two choices, Sam said as the elevator arrived. Accept this as your reality or change it. Just stop pretending things will improve on their own. That conversation echoed in my mind the whole way home. He was right. I'd been waiting for recognition instead of creating my own opportunities. The next morning, I handed my resignation letter to Marcus's assistant, Linda, and asked to schedule a meeting about transition plans. She looked surprised. Hardly anyone ever left Thompson Associates voluntarily. The agency was known for stability and decent benefits, attracting people who valued security more than ambition. Marcus barely reacted. He skimmed the letter, asked why I was leaving, and accepted my 2 weeks' notice without emotional counteroffer. No discussion, no acknowledgement of what my departure meant. "I'm sure you'll find something that suits your expectations," he said, already refocused on his computer. "Linda will handle the details." That indifference confirmed what I'd long suspected. In Marcus's eyes, I was easily replaceable. The sting lasted about 10 minutes, then gave way to a feeling I hadn't felt in years: freedom. For the first time in 3 years, I had control over my future. No more watching others take credit, no more staying quiet while being overlooked, no more letting someone else determine my worth. The final 2 weeks passed peacefully. I documented my work, organized my files, and ensured no one would need to contact me afterward. Jessica avoided me in the hallways, maybe sensing that the balance of power was shifting. Ryan was confused about why I was leaving without another job lined up, but his curiosity felt more like interest in a social experiment than genuine concern. On my last day, Marcus stepped out of his office just long enough to shake my hand and deliver one final comment. "I hope you've learned something about managing expectations. The market's competitive, not everyone is cut out for leadership. Sometimes supporting roles are where people add the most value." It was a parting shot meant to seed doubt, but it only strengthened my resolve. I would prove him wrong visibly. I packed up 3 years into one cardboard box and rode the elevator down, full of uncertainty, but also possibility. At night, Maria helped me turn my spare bedroom into a home office. We set up a proper desk, dual monitors, and created a professional space for client meetings. The transformation felt final, like crossing a bridge I wouldn't return from. No. "The best part of working for yourself?" Maria asked as we built a filing cabinet. "When you win, the credit is yours. When you fail, you learn. Either way, it's all you." The first week without a job was terrifying. Silence, the lack of structure, it was jarring after years of routine. Doubts crept in. But by the second week, something changed. I started researching businesses, identifying challenges I could solve, and reaching out to Sam for advice on launching my own practice. I created marketing materials that showcased my actual capabilities rather than my official job titles. Most importantly, I began to think of myself as a business owner rather than a job seeker. The process of building something from nothing required skills that Thompson Associates had never allowed me to develop. I learned about business registration, tax implications, client contracts, and pricing strategies. Each challenge forced me to grow in ways that my corporate cubicle had actively prevented. 3 weeks after leaving Thompson Associates, I landed my first independent client. A small tech startup in Boulder needed marketing strategy for their product launch. The project was exactly the type of work I had always wanted to do: comprehensive research, strategic planning, creative campaign development, and direct client interaction. For the first time in my professional life, I would receive credit for my ideas and be compensated fairly for my expertise. The startup's founder, David Kim, hired me after a single consultation meeting. He appreciated my thorough analysis of his market position and my practical recommendations for reaching his target audience. There were no committees to convince, no office politics to navigate, no colleagues to compete with for recognition, just a business problem that needed solving. And a client who valued solutions. "Alex, this is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need," David said as he signed the consulting agreement. "When can you start? When can you start?" 4 words that Marcus Thompson had never spoken to me in 3 years of employment. 4 words that represented everything I had been denied at Thompson Associates: opportunity, respect, and the chance to prove my worth. The euphoria of landing my first client lasted exactly until I realized that one project wouldn't pay my bills for more than 6 weeks. David Kim's startup provided validation that my ideas had value. But building a sustainable consulting practice required a pipeline of clients that seemed impossibly distant from my converted spare bedroom office. The transition from steady corporate salary to unpredictable freelance income was like learning to breathe underwater. My savings account dwindled with alarming speed. Health insurance became a monthly negotiation with financial anxiety. The student loan payments that had been manageable on a corporate salary now loomed like storm clouds over every business decision. There were nights when I lay awake calculating how many clients I needed to maintain my current lifestyle, then recalculating based on more modest assumptions about rent and groceries. The rejection emails started arriving within my second month of independence. Potential clients who seemed enthusiastic during initial conversations would suddenly go silent after I submitted proposals. Others would respond with feedback that my rates were outside their budget range or that they had decided to handle marketing internally. Each rejection felt personal, like judgment on my worth as a professional and my decision to leave corporate security. The most demoralizing responses came from companies that clearly didn't understand the value of strategic marketing consultation. They wanted someone to design flyers and manage their social media accounts for minimum wage rates, not develop comprehensive campaigns that could transform their business. These interactions forced me to confront an uncomfortable reality. Many potential clients saw marketing as an expense rather than an investment. But the worst part wasn't the rejections or the financial stress. The worst part was the isolation. Working from home meant days without meaningful professional interaction, without colleagues to bounce ideas off, without the energy that comes from being part of a team working toward shared goals. The silence of my apartment office was deafening. After years of corporate noise and activity, Maria tried to be supportive, but her own consulting practice had grown to the point where she rarely remembered the anxiety of those early months. Sam Carter offered advice and encouragement, but he was managing multiple client relationships and didn't have time for extensive mentoring. I was discovering that independence came with a steep learning curve that required climbing alone. Breakthrough started with David Kim's startup launching their product 3 months ahead of schedule. The marketing campaign I had developed generated immediate traction in their target market. Pre-orders exceeded expectations by 400%. Industry publications wrote features about their innovative approach to customer acquisition. David was ecstatic about the results and insisted that my strategic framework had been crucial to their success. More importantly, David started recommending my services to other entrepreneurs in his network. The referrals came slowly at first, but each new client represented validation that my work produced measurable results. Word-of-mouth marketing began replacing my desperate cold outreach emails. Clients were finding me instead of me chasing them. The momentum shift was gradual, but unmistakable. A boutique law firm hired me to revamp their client acquisition strategy. A local restaurant chain needed help positioning their brand for expansion into neighboring markets. A software company wanted guidance on messaging for their enterprise sales team. Each project allowed me to demonstrate different aspects of my expertise while building a portfolio of successful outcomes. But success brought its own challenges. Managing multiple clients simultaneously required organizational skills that corporate employment had never demanded. I was learning to be a project manager, account executive, strategic consultant, and business owner, all at once. The variety was exhilarating and exhausting in equal measure. The real test came when one of my largest clients, a mid-sized manufacturing company, experienced a public relations crisis that threatened their reputation and customer relationships. Their previous marketing approach had been traditional and conservative, focused on product features rather than customer value. When online reviews started highlighting quality control issues, they needed a comprehensive strategy for rebuilding trust and credibility. The situation required everything. I had learned about crisis communication, brand positioning, and customer psychology. I developed a multi-channel response plan that included direct customer outreach, transparent communication about improvements, and a complete overhaul of their quality messaging. The timeline was aggressive, and the stakes were high. Failure would mean losing a major client and potentially damaging my emerging reputation. Working 18-hour days for 3 weeks, I coordinated with their operations team, trained their customer service representatives, and managed media relationships that I had never handled before. The stress was overwhelming, but the challenge forced me to grow in ways that comfortable projects never could have achieved. The campaign succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. Customer complaints decreased by 70% within a month. Online reviews shifted from predominantly negative to mostly positive. The manufacturing company not only retained their existing customer base but attracted new clients who appreciated their transparent approach to quality improvement. The manufacturing company's CEO, Patricia Valdez, was so impressed with the results that she insisted on writing a LinkedIn recommendation highlighting my strategic thinking and execution capabilities. That recommendation became a turning point in my business development. Other executives in her network started reaching out with similar challenges. Patricia also introduced me to the Denver Business Association, where I began attending monthly networking events. These gatherings were entirely different from the corporate meetings I was accustomed to. Instead of competing for recognition within a single organization, I was building relationships with potential clients and collaborators. Across multiple industries, the networking environment suited my personality in ways that corporate politics never had. I could discuss marketing strategy without worrying about someone stealing my ideas or taking credit for my insights. When I shared case studies from successful campaigns, the audience was genuinely interested in learning rather than positioning themselves for advancement. One evening, at a Denver Business Association mixer, I encountered someone who made my stomach drop. Ryan Walsh was representing Thompson Associates at the event, presumably trying to generate new business for the agency. He approached me with the forced enthusiasm of someone pretending that our previous relationship had been more collegial than it actually was. "Alex, great to see you here," Ryan said, extending his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I heard you've been doing some consulting work. Is that going for you?" The condescending tone was subtle but unmistakable. Ryan was fishing for information about my business, while simultaneously suggesting that my independent practice was a temporary experiment rather than a serious career move. His presence reminded me that my former colleagues were probably watching my progress with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "Business is growing faster than I expected," I replied, matching his superficial friendliness. "I'm working with some fascinating companies on strategic challenges that keep me engaged." Ryan's expression shifted slightly, suggesting that my response wasn't what he had anticipated. He probably expected to hear about financial struggles or regrets about leaving corporate security. Instead, I was describing success and satisfaction that his agency employment couldn't match. "That's great to hear," Ryan said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Marcus mentioned that you left to pursue consulting. He wondered if you might be interested in project work with Thompson Associates. You know, if you ever want to collaborate with your old team." The offer was transparently desperate. Thompson Associates wanted access to my independent client relationships while maintaining control over project management and client communication. They were essentially proposing that I function as an unpaid business development resource for the agency that had spent 3 years undervaluing my contributions. I appreciate the thought, I replied, but my client commitments keep me fully occupied. Maybe Marcus should focus on developing the talent he already has instead of trying to outsource strategy work. The conversation ended quickly after that. Ryan disappeared into the crowd, probably to report back to Marcus about my unexpected confidence and apparent success. I spent the rest of the evening building genuine relationships with business owners who appreciated strategic thinking and were willing to pay fairly for expertise. Driving home that night, I realized that encountering Ryan had been a gift rather than an awkward moment. His condescending assumptions about my business reminded me how far I had traveled from the cubicle where my ideas were stolen and my potential was dismissed. More importantly, his offer to collaborate revealed that Thompson Associates was struggling to replace the strategic thinking they had never properly valued when it was sitting right in front of them. The tests and obstacles of building an independent practice were far from over. But each challenge was making me stronger and more confident in my abilities. Unlike corporate employment, where success was measured by someone else's standards and recognition depended on political maneuvering, independent consulting provided direct correlation between effort and results. My business was growing not because I had learned to play office politics better, but because I was solving real problems for clients who valued solutions. The scraps I had been expected to be grateful for at Thompson Associates were being replaced by substantial projects that utilized my full range of capabilities. The foundation was solidifying, but the real test of my transformation was still ahead. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing campaign analytics for a client in the renewable energy sector. The number on my screen was unfamiliar, but the voice that greeted me was one I recognized immediately from 3 years of corporate meetings and performance reviews. "Alex, this is Marcus Thompson," the voice said, with an undertone of forced casualness that immediately raised my suspicions. "I hope you're doing well. I was wondering if we could schedule a conversation about a potential opportunity." The word opportunity coming from Marcus Thompson was like hearing a loan shark discuss friendship. Every syllable carried implications that extended far beyond the surface meaning. I let the silence stretch for a few seconds, enjoying the unfamiliar sensation of holding power in a conversation with my former boss. "What kind of opportunity?" I asked, keeping my tone professionally neutral while internally savoring the role reversal. "Well, Thompson Associates has been experiencing some challenges with client retention," Marcus admitted, his voice carrying a strain that suggested the situation was more serious than he was willing to acknowledge. "A few of our major accounts have expressed dissatisfaction with our strategic approach. I thought perhaps we could discuss bringing you back in a consulting capacity to help address these concerns." The irony was so thick it was almost suffocating. The agency that had dismissed my strategic thinking for 3 years was now asking me to rescue their client relationships. The man who had told me I should be grateful for the opportunity to fetch coffee was now begging for my expertise to save his business. "Which accounts are you referring to?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. "Thompson Automotive has been particularly vocal about their concerns," Marcus said, his admission confirming my suspicions. "They feel that our recent campaigns haven't delivered the market impact they expected. There have been discussions about potentially ending our contract." Thompson Automotive is the account I had researched extensively, the strategy I had developed, the campaign that Jessica Chen had presented as her own breakthrough thinking. The client relationship that had been built on my uncredited work was now crumbling under the weight of subsequent campaigns that lacked the foundational understanding I had provided. "I see," I replied, allowing another pause to emphasize that. I was considering his request rather than jumping at the opportunity. "What specifically are they unhappy with?" Marcus's explanation revealed the full scope of Thompson Associates' decline. After I left, Jessica Chen had been promoted to lead strategist for the automotive account. Without access to my research and strategic frameworks, her subsequent campaigns had been superficial and ineffective. The client had noticed the dramatic difference in quality and strategic depth between their early successful campaigns and the more recent disappointing results. But the problems extended beyond a single account. Other clients had also expressed concerns about the agency's strategic capabilities. Projects were being completed on time and within budget, but the creative thinking and innovative approaches that had previously distinguished Thompson Associates were conspicuously absent. The agency was fulfilling contracts without providing the strategic value that justified their premium pricing. The truth is, Marcus continued, his voice carrying a vulnerability I had never heard before. We've realized that your contributions were more significant than we initially recognized. The strategic foundation you provided for several of our major accounts has been difficult to replicate. There it was, the admission I had waited 3 years to hear. Marcus Thompson, the man who had dismissed my ideas and minimized my contributions, was acknowledging that my work had been the invisible foundation supporting his agency's success. The validation felt simultaneously satisfying and hollow, like winning an argument with someone who was no longer worth arguing with. I appreciate the acknowledgement, I replied, but I'm not sure how I can help. My client commitments are quite demanding. This was true, but also strategic. My independent practice had grown to the point where I was turning down projects and considering hiring additional consultants to meet demand. The financial anxiety that had characterized my early months of independence had been replaced by the luxury of choosing which opportunities deserved my attention. Marcus's response revealed the desperation behind his call. We would be willing to offer you a very competitive compensation package, significantly more than your previous salary, plus equity participation in the agency's success, was simultaneously flattering and insulting. Flattering because it represented a dramatic increase in Marcus's assessment of my value. Insulting because it assumed that money could repair the damage done by 3 years of professional dismissal and idea theft. Marcus, I need to ask you something directly, I said, deciding to confront the elephant in the room. Are you offering me equity in an agency that built its reputation on campaigns, developed using my uncredited strategic work? The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Marcus was probably calculating how much he could acknowledge without admitting to systematic intellectual theft. The pause stretched long enough to become uncomfortable, which was exactly what I intended. Alex, I think there may have been some miscommunication about attribution during your time here, Marcus finally said, his words carefully chosen to avoid actual responsibility. The collaborative nature of our work sometimes made it difficult to properly credit individual contributions. Miscommunication. The word choice was masterful in its evasiveness. 3 years of watching Jessica Chen present my ideas as her own innovations had been reduced to miscommunication about attribution. The systematic dismissal of my strategic thinking had become collaborative work with unclear credit allocation. Understand? I replied, though understanding and accepting were entirely different things. Unfortunately, I don't think returning to Thompson Associates would be the right choice for either of us. The rejection clearly wasn't what Marcus had expected. He had probably assumed that offering more money and acknowledging my contributions would be sufficient to secure my cooperation. The idea that I might have moved beyond needing his validation or employment had apparently not occurred to him. Alex, I hope you'll reconsider, Marcus said, his tone shifting toward something approaching pleading. The agency needs your strategic expertise. We're prepared to offer you significant creative control and leadership responsibilities. Creative control and leadership responsibilities. The very things I had been denied during my 3 years of employment were now being offered. As incentives to return? The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so pathetic. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested in returning to Thompson Associates in any capacity, I replied with finality. My independent practice allows me to work with clients who value strategic thinking from the beginning of our relationship. The conversation ended shortly after that, but the implications extended far beyond a single phone call. Marcus Thompson's desperation revealed that my departure had created consequences he was only now beginning to understand. The strategic thinking he had dismissed as support documentation was apparently essential to his agency's continued success. Within a week, the broader scope of Thompson Associates' crisis became clear. Jessica Chen reached out through LinkedIn, requesting a coffee meeting to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. Her message was professionally polite, but carried undertones of barely controlled panic. The golden child of the agency was discovering that stealing ideas was easier than generating them independently. Ryan Walsh sent a more direct message, asking if I would consider taking on some of their overflow projects as a subcontractor. His request was couched in terms of mutual benefit, but the subtext was unmistakable. Thompson Associates was struggling to deliver quality work for their existing clients and needed external expertise to maintain their contracts. The most revealing contact came from Linda, Marcus's assistant. She called to ask if I would be interested in interviewing for the position of creative director, a role that hadn't existed during my employment but was apparently being created to address their strategic crisis. Mr. Thompson asked me to emphasize that this would be a senior leadership position with significant autonomy. Linda explained, her voice carrying the practiced enthusiasm of someone delivering a sales pitch. He mentioned that you would have authority over campaign development and strategic planning for all major accounts. The offer was everything I had wanted during my 3 years of corporate employment. Senior leadership, strategic authority, recognition for my contributions, and presumably compensation that reflected the value of my expertise. It was also completely irrelevant to my current situation. Linda, please tell Mr. Thompson that I'm flattered by the offer, but I'm not interested in returning to Thompson Associates, I replied. My independent practice provides everything I need professionally. The truth was more complex than my polite response suggested. Thompson Associates' crisis was providing validation that my strategic contributions had been more valuable than anyone had acknowledged. But returning to save the agency that had spent 3 years dismissing my potential would have been a betrayal of everything I had built independently. More importantly, the desperation in these offers revealed a fundamental shift in power dynamics. For the first time in our professional relationship, Marcus Thompson needed me more than I needed him. The agency that had treated me as replaceable was discovering that some contributions are irreplaceable. The final test of my resolve came when Thompson Automotive's CEO, Jonathan Mills, contacted me directly. He had apparently learned about my previous work on their account and wanted to discuss the possibility of hiring me as an independent consultant. The conversation was refreshingly direct. Alex, we've been disappointed with the strategic quality of our recent campaigns. Jonathan explained during our phone call. When we investigated the difference between our early successful work and the recent results, your name kept coming up as someone who had provided significant strategic input. The validation was satisfying, but the opportunity was extraordinary. Thompson Automotive represented exactly the kind of high-profile client that could transform my independent practice into a major consulting firm. Landing their account would provide financial security and industry credibility that would attract other premium clients. I'd be very interested in discussing how I can help Thompson Automotive achieve their marketing objectives, I replied, already envisioning the strategic challenges their account would present. The irony was perfect. Thompson Associates was losing their most important client to the consultant they had dismissed as a supporting player. The agency that had built its reputation on my uncredited work was about to watch their flagship account become the foundation of my independent success. Marcus Thompson's 17 phone calls the following day suddenly made perfect sense. He wasn't just losing a client. He was losing a client to the person whose strategic expertise he had spent 3 years undervaluing. The power shift was complete and irreversible. 6 months later, I was sitting in the penthouse conference room of the Colorado Convention Center, overlooking downtown Denver through floor-to-ceiling windows that stretched toward the mountains. The space was filled with executives from 12 major companies, all waiting to hear my presentation on integrated marketing strategy for the digital age. The irony wasn't lost on me that this same venue had hosted Thompson Associates' annual client appreciation events, where I had once served as the invisible coordinator, ensuring everyone had name tags and coffee. Thompson Automotive had become the cornerstone client that transformed my independent practice into Rivera Strategic Consulting, a firm that now employed 8 specialists and occupied the entire 15th floor of a downtown high-rise. Jonathan Mills hadn't just hired me as a consultant. He had become an advocate who introduced me to his network of fellow CEOs and industry leaders. Within 3 months of landing their account, I was fielding inquiries from companies across the region, who wanted the same strategic depth that had revitalized Thompson Automotive's market position. The growth had been both exhilarating and overwhelming. Maria helped me navigate the transition from solo practitioner to team leader, sharing insights from her own scaling experience. Sam Carter became my first associate consultant, bringing his expertise in digital marketing to complement my strategic planning capabilities. We hired specialists in data analytics, creative direction, and client relationship management, building a team that could handle complex, multifaceted campaigns that most agencies couldn't match. But the real transformation wasn't in the office space or employee count. It was in the way clients approached our relationship. Instead of fighting for recognition within corporate hierarchies, I was setting strategic direction for companies that valued innovation over politics. Instead of watching other people present my ideas, I was delivering keynote presentations at industry conferences and being quoted in marketing publications as an expert voice. The speaking engagement that brought everything full circle was the Denver Marketing Excellence Awards, where I had been invited to present the closing keynote on strategic innovation in competitive markets. The event was the highlight of the local marketing calendar, attended by every major agency and corporate marketing team in the region. As I prepared my presentation, I knew that Thompson Associates would be in the audience, along with Jessica Chen, Ryan Walsh, and Marcus Thompson himself. Walking onto that stage felt like the culmination of a journey that had begun in a cramped cubicle, where my ideas were stolen and my potential was dismissed. The audience of 300 marketing professionals represented the industry that had once treated me as invisible. Now they were here to learn from strategies I had developed and implemented successfully across multiple industries. My presentation focused on the importance of authentic strategic thinking over superficial campaign execution. I shared case studies from Rivera Strategic Consulting's work with Thompson Automotive and other major clients, demonstrating how deep market research and innovative positioning could transform business outcomes. The audience was engaged and responsive, asking thoughtful questions that showed they understood the value of comprehensive strategic planning. During the networking reception that followed, I was approached by dozens of marketing executives who wanted to discuss potential collaborations. The conversations were entirely different from the corporate networking I remembered. Instead of political maneuvering and credit-seeking, these discussions focused on solving business challenges and creating mutual value. I exchanged contact information with potential clients, speaking engagements, and collaboration opportunities that would have been unimaginable during my Thompson Associates days. The moment that crystallized my transformation came when Marcus Thompson appeared at my elbow during the reception. He looked older than I remembered, with gray streaks in his hair and lines around his eyes that suggested stress had taken its toll. His approach was tentative, almost deferential, completely different from the dismissive authority figure who had once controlled my professional destiny. "Lex, congratulations on your success," Marcus said, his voice carrying a mixture of admiration and regret. "Your presentation was remarkable. The strategic frameworks you discussed are exactly what the industry needs." The compliment was genuine, but it also carried the weight of everything that had gone unsaid between us. Marcus was acknowledging not just my current success, but the strategic thinking he had dismissed during my 3 years of employment. The validation felt simultaneously satisfying and unnecessary. "Thank you," I replied, maintaining professional courtesy while internally noting how the power dynamic had shifted. "I appreciate you saying so." Marcus hesitated, then continued with obvious difficulty. "I want you to know that I recognize the mistakes we made during your time at Thompson Associates. I should have valued your contributions more highly. We should have given you the recognition and opportunities your work deserved." The apology was more than I had expected and less than I had once needed. 3 years earlier, those words would have meant everything to me. Now they felt like a footnote to a story that had moved far beyond the need for his validation. "Appreciate the acknowledgement," I replied. "Honestly, leaving Thompson Associates was the best career decision I ever made. The experience taught me to value my own worth instead of waiting for others to recognize it." Marcus nodded, understanding the implicit message. Our conversation was interrupted by Patricia Valdez, the manufacturing company CEO, who had been one of my early clients. She approached with a warm smile and immediate recognition of my success. Alex, I've been following Rivera Strategic Consulting's growth with great interest, Patricia said. Your team's work continues to impress me. I was just telling my colleagues about the crisis management campaign you developed for us last year. Patricia valued my expertise and celebrated my success, while Marcus was struggling to process the reality that his former employee had become a significant competitor. The difference between clients who appreciated strategic thinking and employers who dismissed it was crystallized in that single moment. As the evening concluded, I reflected on the journey from corporate invisibility to industry recognition. The transformation hadn't been about proving Marcus Thompson wrong, though that had certainly been satisfying. It had been about proving myself right about my own potential and value. My phone buzzed with a text message from Maria. Saw your presentation coverage in the Denver Business Journal. Mom and Dad would be so proud. You've built something incredible. She was right. Rivera Strategic Consulting represented everything I had dreamed of during those frustrating years at Thompson Associates. More importantly, it represented the validation that comes from creating value rather than seeking recognition. The drive home took me past the building where Thompson Associates still maintained their offices. The windows were dark, and I wondered if the agency was still struggling with the strategic challenges that had prompted Marcus's desperate phone calls. But the thought was fleeting and held no emotional weight. My focus was entirely on the future. Rivera Strategic Consulting had proposals pending with 3 Fortune 500 companies. We were expanding into new markets and developing innovative service offerings that would distinguish us from traditional marketing agencies. The team I had built was attracting top talent from across the industry, creating a culture where strategic thinking was valued and innovation was rewarded. They had once told me I should be grateful for scraps. Now they were grateful when I answered their calls. But the real transformation wasn't in their changed attitude toward me. It was in my complete indifference to their opinion. I had built something valuable, something mine, something that would outlast any single client relationship or industry recognition. The scraps had been replaced by a feast of my own making. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories, right? On your screen, if this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Let's click and check them out.